Good evening and welcome to In My Humble Opinion. I'm your host, Niceguy. My guest tonight is celebrating the recent release of her new book. It is my pleasure to welcome the author of Rumplepimple, Suzanne DeWitt Hall. Suzanne, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm so glad to talk to you.
So tell us a little bit about Rumplepimple.
Well, Rumplepimple is this particular book we're planning to have be the first one because he's a Werefox Terrier, and Werefox Terriers are notorious for getting it up to all kinds of no goodness. So this particular book is a story about how he races out, jumps out of the car, runs into the grocery store, and my wife Diane, is based on a real story.
Okay.
My wife Diane actually this happened to, and she found him at the meat counter. So I thought it would make a fun children's story to kind of explain that he was actually there to do a good deed. And so in the Rumplepimple story, he's saving the day. He helps this little girl who a bad kid is picking on. So that's kind of where that came from.
And now this is your first book or first children's book?
This is the first children's book that we've published. I've got some other children's books that I've written but haven't done anything with.
Okay. So so there's definitely future plans either with those or making a series out of this one then?
Yeah, well, we've got ideas for several more ideas for Rumplepimple Adventures. Another thing that he did was he got loose one day from our apartment. He used to be really good at escaping when he was younger. And as the years have passed, he's kind of lost that will to be anywhere else, thank goodness. But he used to be an escape artist. So one day he took off and we panicked. We lived in this small kind of a resort town, and it was a big festival weekend. Oh. So people everywhere.
Right.
And we panicked, and eventually we thought to call the police. And so we called the police, and they asked for a description of the lawbreaker. And we described, and they said, yeah, we have somebody here who matches that description. We went down, and they literally opened a cell door and let him out. So that's going to be another one of his adventures. I have to figure out what kind of good deed he was doing. You know, it's always a challenge to find out what he's actually doing that's a rescue moment.
Okay.
For why he goes to jail.
So, well, I was going to ask you what drove you to this project in particular, but obviously part of this is your adorable dog.
Yeah, and he's just so funny. And there's this big market of people who are obsessive about terriers in general, and Werefox Terriers are particularly beloved, and they've been featured in all kinds of movies, Rin Tin and Thin Man. And I mean, for generations after generations, people love Werefox Terriers. So we thought there would be a market for it, that people would enjoy it, and that we liked the idea of an alternative family structure and featuring that. So yeah, it's been really fun to work on.
Can imagine. Now, with the you mentioned the alternative family structure, and I was wondering if you had a particular intended audience, maybe age group, and also what you really want them to take away from all of this as they read these stories.
The age group, I think it's probably first, second grade. It's kind of a story that parents, we could see both young children reading, and it's not really an early reader where the language is so stripped down, but for parents to read, or even, slightly older kids, even though it's a picture book, the humor is something that translates better to like maybe third, fourth grade.
Okay.
But partially, I remember the days of reading to my kids, and they want you to read the same books over and over again, and you get bored. So I wanted a book that the parents would kind of find humorous as well. So as far as the alternative family structure, I attended a children's writers group panel discussion, and it included librarians from schools and public libraries, school libraries and public libraries. And they were saying that they needed two things. One was books that encouraged kids that don't like to read to read. And that's often kind of like a little bit edgy, naughty comedy, like the Captain Underpants, and, where there's a little bit of like potty humor seems to always be popular for some reason.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's adults even. And alternative family structures, they were saying that there aren't enough books out there for kids. So it just seemed like a natural fit to kind of turn this whole thing. There would be, you've got the Werefox Terrier lovers, you've got the kids who are kind of reluctant to read, but there's this funny kind of naughty thing that Charlie does. And then you've got the alternative families. So kind of put it all together.
Right. Now, Charlie is your actual dog's name, correct?
Oh, sorry. It's got to be a little confusing. Yeah. Right. His actual name is Charles Montgomery DeWitt Hall, which is quite a mouthful.
It's a lot to say if you need to call him over. So
Exactly. He only gets called that if he's in trouble, and that'll be in a book. That's you're in trouble when you get all the names.
Absolutely.
But I'm a kind of a nickname person, and so everything I have it seems like everyone I love gets a nickname. And with Charlie, one day he was having like a really bad fur day, and so we called him like Rumpelstiltskin, and then that changed to like Rumplepumple and Rumplepilskin, and it settled on Rumplepimple. And so most of the time, though his name is Charlie, it's now been shortened to Pimple, which is really kind of weird. Our neighbors think we're crazy because if we're talking to both of the animals, it's like chicken, Pimple. So they really don't know what's going on over here. Summer drives them crazy with all of our conversations.
Right. And the other animal is the cat from the story. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now her real name is Anastasia Butterscotch, but her again with the nicknames, for some reason I like kitchens and I like kittens, and for some reason I combined those and it came out to be Chicken, and so she's been called Chicken for years. She doesn't know her real name. Okay. Charlie knows his real name.
and I understand if she's kind of the foil in the book for Charlie.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, she came first, and so she thinks she should be the boss.
Of course.
Yeah, and she's a cat, so the cats are always going to be the boss. So she kind of hangs around and just looks disapproving at him, really.
Oh, okay. So now, you wrote this? Who does the illustration, and how'd you find them? What drew him to the project?
Well, we had a friend who wrote some children's books because he and his wife adopted children, and because they decided they weren't appropriate for parents, and that's a whole nother story. But the book is called A Child in Our Hearts. Okay. And it was a lovely, beautiful book, and he ended up expanding those to write the book for two mommies, for two daddies, for artificial reproductive technologies. He's got all these different versions. Wow. And we thought that illustrator would be a really good fit for Charlie, and so we contacted him. So it's kind of like a friend or a referral sort of situation. Okay. But we liked the way he captured Charlie's essence and the moms. We love how he translated us.
Right, because and I was going to ask if the two characters are necessarily based on you, but obviously if this is all inspired by exactly. half inspired by real life events, so that's right. That's great.
Well, he makes me look particularly good. I really like the way he makes me look.
Well, I did a webcomic myself a while back, and people were always surprised how I drew the character that represented me. For one, I had hair. I always got a shot about that. So, what authors or books inspire you? What do you draw your inspiration from other than?
Oh my gosh, reading is such a challenge. And my wife being a book publicist, we get a lot of books that people say, can you read this for me? And she'll often ask my opinions. So I have this range and I also volunteer at this little tiny 2-room library where you hand stamp the books. I volunteer there. So I'm constantly, and they have the greatest books. They have the greatest, and they're always bringing in the top selling and lovely books. So I've got this mix of people who are writing like not necessarily top notch stuff from one hand to reading like this tremendous Lily King and beautiful, wonderful writing, which totally intimidates you. So I go from like, oh, I can do better than that to, oh my God, I suck. So, a pretty wide range.
Right. Okay.
As far as the children's book, Dave Pilkey, because, Captain Underpants was transformative to my son's life, life of reading, where it really turned fun. But yeah, just a lot of things. Fairy tales. I used to love fairy tales. So all kinds of stuff, really.
Okay. What did you find to be the hardest part of the whole process? Because you used to write very different kinds of stuff. We talked a little bit before the show. You came from more of a technical writing background. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I was a technical writer. Then I was a sort of a high-tech journalist. I wrote about the software internationalization industry, which means, getting software translated into, 10 languages to ship simultaneously. Okay.
So that's quite a shifting of gears then to...
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I divorced about 5 years ago and kind of kick-started my life. And because my wife encouraged me so strongly to be dancing in the gifts that God gave me, rather than kind of doing the administrative kind of stuff that I could do and was good at. Yeah, so we're just living poor. We're poor artists, but loving the process of exploring that side of me that was always this little kind of thing I did on the side.
Right. So you have since quit your day job then? Is that correct? Or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, when my day job at that time was working with my husband running a small web development, software development, and social media and marketing company. So, yeah, when the marriage exploded.
You didn't stay working with him, huh?
No, that sort of severed that.
All right, okay. Any advice for up and coming aspiring authors? Any lessons learned?
Just do it. Just do it. Don't give up. Keep going. That's pretty much it. And edit and take criticism. Listen to people's advice. Don't get your panties in a wad because someone tells you something that you don't like.
That's tough advice. That's good advice in general, but very difficult to take for a lot of people.
It is, but you want to have a good book is the thing. Yeah. You want to have a good product, and you want something that people are going to read. If you write a bad book, you can either get your heart broken because you pitch it to 1 million people and they all say no, or you can spend a bunch of money self-publishing it and have it not read and have your heart, like I said, you have your heart broken either way. So, and be poorer if you put money into it.
Right. Yeah.
So get help writing a good book.
Now, you've written. I've read some of your blogs as well, and you've written a lot about your involvement with the church. Now, before we get into that, though, I'm a little bit curious. Being that this is a book about, as you say, an alternative family structure, it is aimed at children, and I wonder if it's any a concern of yours that there may be some blowback at some point, from somebody who may not think that is. And I'm not speaking personally. Is not my opinion. I'm just saying that. Well, I mean. Are you ever concerned you're going to have the Westboro Baptists camped out on your front lawn at some point, or?
Not really. I mean, my take is bring it. Really, I think that our faith is really deep, and I met my wife at church, and we grew to be friends. And she came to my Bible study, and we pray together every day. We do Bible study. We kind of investigate God's word together almost daily. And I think that if you're trying to do what God wants you to do, then bring on whatever comes as part of it. It doesn't matter, if you're doing something, if you're being true to yourself, there's a good chance somebody's going to be after you. So you just got to keep going.
That's true. Now, as I understand it too, the church that you were at, where you were attending and very much involved in when you met your wife, they did not respond particularly well to your relationship.
Well, you know what? I don't even think they understood at the time what it was. I think that they were so appalled that both of us were divorcing at the same time because Diane's husband moved out, and then my relationship blew up through a complicated series of things, but very explosion is the right word for what happened at the end.
Okay.
And so I ended up moving in with her. I had nowhere to go. And there was another woman in the church who was going to be, her house was going to be empty for several weeks. And so we said, so the church came, the priest and his wife, really his wife, came to me and said, we don't think you should be living with Diane. And I said, okay, I have nowhere to go. Where do I go? And I'm scared. At that point, I was very frightened because of what was happening in my life. And I said, well, how about maybe I could stay at this woman's house? And she turned it down. She said no. And she was one of the leaders of the church and one of the women's leaders. So, it was a very weird, they didn't even know how to handle divorce, let alone the concept that maybe there's something between the two of us.
Right. And that's a Catholic, and this is a Catholic church. So divorce is still a very touchy subject.
It wasn't Catholic, actually. It's this strange denomination. I was a very Catholic leaning, which is probably something you were reading. And my wife came from a Baptist background.
Right. Okay.
But so this church we were in is very socially conservative. The services are very much like an evangelical church, except they might also pray in tongues and do healings and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it's a very interesting. So you might have incense and people falling on the ground. You never know what's going to happen on a Sunday.
Right.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But they were extremely socially conservative. So, divorce, they didn't know how to handle it. So they figured if they provided any kind of support to us, then that was tacitly supporting divorce. And then, so they just freaked out.
Right. Okay. And then, so it didn't even, I take it this was not the church you were married in ultimately then.
No. You take it right.
Yes. Okay. And you're in now. I mean, this is also just as a little bit of a contrast. You're in Massachusetts, correct?
Yes.
So this is the first state to legalize same-sex marriage, whereas I'm broadcasting from Michigan, whose ban on same-sex marriage is the one that's hopefully going to put the final nail in the coffin once the Supreme Court overturns it this month. And I mean, honestly, listening to Michigan's Solicitor General's argument before the court, it was weak tea. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I don't think there is a good argument against it, and I'm thinking I could have done better. It was bad. I'm just looking at this going, are you even trying? You should have just taken the California route.
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just a front.
Yeah, it could have. It seriously, it was weak. But
make his constituency happy, but not, fight himself.
And now, and she was coming from a Baptist church as well. You say so. There had to be. I guess what was the reaction of family and friends then when you guys got together?
It's still unfolding.
Okay.
For my kids, they were never churched. My ex was very much an atheist, and my daughter was a religion major, but is also an atheist and did like an atheist blog radio for a while. And so she and my son was kind of like, he's also tends toward the analytical, but I don't think he's as opinionated about it. I'm not really sure. But they thought I was crazy for being in this church to begin with. So this whole, for my kids, I think that the same-sex thing was not as big a deal as the whole church thing had been, right? Like I was crazier for that. As far as Diane's side, there's still, and that's not to say that some of the people in my family didn't potentially have struggles with it. My mom, I think, was confused. She loves Diane, though. So it took some time. Diane's family was a lot harder. They live in the South. Almost everybody lives in Florida. And her sisters and her mom struggled with it. Well, she's got 4 sisters. So a couple of them were more like love is love. And then a couple of them are, I love you, but you're going to burn in hell. So
always a nice thing to tell somebody.
Pretty much, we don't want you to burn in hell, but we're afraid you're going to burn in hell. And how do we manage this conflict within our own hearts? Because we know you love God. So how can you love God and be doing this? So, but everybody, it's kind of after a few years. And her mom, we just got married in October of this past year. And her mom actually came up and surprised her to be here, which was a major deal. So, it's been gradual, but, you can't deny love. You see it in action. You see that we're not some kind of freaks. You see that we're not like some kind of pagan ritual, crazy, whatever it is they might have been thinking.
Yeah.
And you can't deny it.
Right. Now, we spoke a little bit before the show. You mentioned actually that the two of you are straight. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. That's accurate. Both of us, had never had same-sex attraction. We'd always dated men. We'd always, my wife actually was married twice before. I started dating my ex in high school, and we, got married in my 20s and just stayed married up until 2010s. And I'm 52. How old am I? So, I started dating him when I was 15.
Oh, wow.
But, and, there were extracurricular guys in there mixed in for me. But anyway, it was all heterosexual. And so that was part of what complicated our own trying to figure it out, because it didn't make sense. That whole, this just does not even make sense in any possible shape. So, I really like the rainbow symbolism, because I think we're one of those weird colors like indigo that you don't really know what it is.
Okay.
It's kind of one of these in-between things.
Right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
is that still again, we don't need to label everything, but is straight still the label that you would identify with, or is?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
There's no word. We were talking to we were talking to somebody and explaining kind of what we are, and saying we don't know what to call it. And she said, well, make up a word.
Sure.
And we don't have one. And, maybe there's one out there and I haven't found it.
If you can make up a word like Rumplepimple, you can come up with a label. I'm sure
it'll be prettier.
You'll come up with something.
It'll be prettier. I do like making up words. I do it a lot in my writing, actually. So that's probably a good idea.
Is it ever difficult, or was it difficult at some point, reconciling your own faith? Because just a disclosure, I wouldn't go so far as to call myself an atheist, but I haven't been inside a church in over 20 years. Yeah. In reading your blogs, obviously you have very strong faith. Yeah. And this plays an important role in your life. Was there ever a difficulty for you reconciling aspects of religion with what you were feeling?
Yes. And the only way, I think that God works more often more powerfully through revelation than through kind of intellectualizing, or, there's this idea that the Bible is the instruction book. And if you follow it and, and take it as a rule book, then that's the way to, get to heaven or whatever. Right. So that's certainly the Baptist view, right?
Right.
That's all there is. There's the Bible and that's it.
Of course, they forget about a lot of the really stupid rules that are in there.
Exactly. Right. That's Old Testament.
Right. Oh, yes.
Right.
Except when we want to grab something from it, and then it's important.
Those parts that, we want to keep. So that's kind of the Baptist view. And you almost don't even need church as a Baptist. You just really need the Bible, and then you're good.
Right.
And the sinner's prayer. In the Catholic view, it's more like the magisterium of the church, the teaching of the church. It's the Bible, and then the teaching and the tradition of the church, which informs all of that, right? Yes. And it tells you, it sort of explains not only the dogmas but the doctrine. So how it kind of puts out the rules. Mm-hmm. So where was I going? Oh, so how to reconcile it. So here I am with thinking that the Catholic Church has all the answers, and that's the other interesting thing about the Baptist view is if you just break the rules, then chances are you're going to go to hell. In the Catholic view, in the official teaching, God is the only one who makes that evaluation, because he knows what's going on in your heart, in your life, in your psyche, in all your parts, right? So the Catholics are often given this bad rap of being very harsh, but in reality, the official teaching is that God evaluates and judges, and that we can be looking at someone who looks like the worst sinner, and they could be the greatest saint ultimately, because God is the one who knows. So that was very attractive to me as a Catholic. Right. But when we came together, and like I said, we're doing Bible studies, and I'm teaching this Baptist how to pray the rosary, and there's all these interesting things going on. Sure. And then our relationship deepens, and there was a time where it shifted from pure friendship to way more. Mm-hmm. And it was traumatic for both of us, and we didn't understand it, but we knew that it was what God wanted, because there's this sometimes when you're walking in the way that you're supposed to be walking, things unfold. There's like all these weird confirmations that happen. And this sounds very kind of like, I don't know, it sounds very strange or magical or something, or ridiculous. But, what we found is that we kept getting confirmations that we were supposed to love each other, that we were supposed to help each other, that we were supposed to spend time together, that we were supposed to love. And it was hard, because I kept thinking, this can't be right. So we just have to figure out how we're supposed to have a relationship and not have it be that kind of love. But it just became clearer and clearer that was the way it was supposed to be. I'd been trapped in this marriage that was very, very bad. It was in so many ways. And kind of as soon as I planned, because I was sort of this Catholic girl in mind and heart, I planned on being married to my death and then hoped I would die really, really young.
Really?
So that I could get out of this marriage.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to be the best wife I can be because I don't know how I'm going to survive, but I'm going to commit myself to being a good wife. Right.
Right.
So.
Well, I was going to say this, but I don't mean to interrupt, but it's that kind of thinking though that turns me against religion, because it sounds like it really gave you some really terrible advice for a long time in your life.
Though, well, see, I wasn't, my faith journey was fairly short. I only started going to church in like 2001 or something. And then it kind of progressed rapidly.
Okay.
And my marriage exploded in 2010. So I'd been on like a journey for about 10 years. So, and I'd only embraced, like, I became more and more Catholic in the last, 3 or 4 of those years. So, but you know what, the weird thing happened was that once I decided to be a really good wife, I kind of got a lot happier and more at peace. And then once I decided, okay, I'm going to love Diane. And, I told my husband that as soon as my son had graduated from high school, that we were going to get a divorce because things were really bad. As soon as those two things came together, everything exploded and I was free. So I said to God, okay, I'm going to do what you want me to do. And then he said, okay, thank you for your submission to what you believe my will is, right? Even though it ultimately wasn't his will, I was saying, okay, here I am, Lord.
You were willing to make the sacrifice.
Boom, here you go.
Huh.
Yeah. It's like, here's this wonderful gift because you were willing to give me your life. And now I'm so happy. I mean, I never dreamed that love and relationship could be like this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. and that is something. I mean, I'm very moved by that myself, because like I say, I'll admit it, I'm pretty cynical about things, and not, again, I'm not it's not a large part of my life. I certainly am not I would never think to use it as a reason to judge somebody or whatever, because that's not really how I go about it. But
you don't want
and no doubt, I'm sure that, I mean, again, this is an LGBT focused radio station, so most of the audience is probably along the same lines. But there may be some people out there who are coming from a more conservative faith who are basically, I mean, just shaking their heads and how can you possibly think this? And I mean, what would you, I mean, or do you give those people a second thought, or what would you say to somebody who, with the best of intentions, is still giving you the fire and brimstone routine?
I love it. I love it.
All right.
I so love debating about it. And, and the Bible is not the enemy of the same sex people. It just isn't. People use it as a weapon, and it's totally not. And we've been working on sort of collecting materials to use for a Bible study in defense of same-sex relationships, because it's there. You don't have to be afraid. It's not one or the other. And so, we've been participating in some Facebook groups that are, gay Christian discussion groups and whatnot. But I find it really fun to go on a very conservative Facebook page and just like post a question or start responding to some of the ridiculous things that they say. And, I love it. Yeah. So, I'm a little bit weird,
Well, no, I do the same thing, and I sarcastically call it trolling, but I try to make more of an effort than that. I mean, I hear you. I come at it from I don't come at it from a religious angle. I come at it from more of an agnostic angle, but at the same time, it's funny because we're criticizing the same things. We're reaching a lot of the same conclusions from very different angles, and that's that's really kind of blown my mind a little bit, because I don't often find much good coming out of that kind of thought process. And that's amazing.
Well, Diane found a quote that she was posting for one of her relatives. I'm not going to say what role, but the other day, I think she said it was Mark Twain, and it said that if Jesus came back, he would not come back as a Christian. And it's like, that's pretty darn powerful.
Interesting.
Because, I think C.S. Lewis said something about the reason that there aren't more Christians is because, oh gosh, what is that quote? I can't remember. But basically, Christians are doing a bad job of what Jesus came down to do.
Well, certainly the right half of the ones in the right half of this country certainly are.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's amazing.
well, and it's gotten to the point. I mean, you've got Rick Santorum telling the Pope that he should shut up about climate change, and you've got the other Republicans telling him that he's being too liberal on social justice
Yeah,
and whatnot. And he should
right.
just keep religion out of politics. You know, really? Oh,
Yeah,
you don't
yeah,
say,
yeah.
Republicans.
Eh,
Oh God. Now
yeah, it's a funny thing.
what are your thoughts on this new pope? I guess now just to clarify, you're not Catholic. You're Catholic leaning. Is that
Right.
correct? Okay,
Yeah,
but I
yeah, yeah,
imagine you probably have some opinions about the clergy. So
yeah.
what do you think about Pope Francis here?
You know, what's not to love? I loved John Paul the
Mm-hmm.
Great. I adored him. I mean, he was my first real pope when I started studying the church,
Mm-hmm.
and I adored him. He did wonderful, wonderful things, and he wrote about the Gospel of Life, and which is the one about sexuality. Maybe it was the Gospel of Life. I don't remember, but he did this big exploration of sexuality, kind of Christianity, but that God made. I mean, if you look at the Bible, it is jam filled with sexuality. My favorite book is the Song of Songs, the Song of Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
Solomon was called the smartest man who was ever created, and yet he had like a zillion wives, and a zillion.
I can only handle one. I definitely would not.
Seriously, seriously, me too. Um, and David was
Mm-hmm.
a man after God's own heart, and he had all these sexual foibles and things. And the Song of Solomon's is this very erotic chapter about amorous love, and the model throughout Old and New scriptures of a relationship with God is marital. And the Eucharist is very, there's a lot of symbolism that's sexual. So I was exploring, so John Paul the Great gave us this exploration of the sacredness of sexuality.
Okay.
And I was fascinated by that. And I started this blog called The Theology of Desire, where I was exploring that. And I was writing about why
that.
homosexual behavior was wrong, was like out of God's perfect design. And it was intrinsically disordered is the phrase.
Okay.
So then here we have Pope Francis. Then you've got the guy in the middle who I'm not going to talk about. But then you've got Pope Francis.
Oh, we got to go back. I'm just kidding. Go on.
So then we have
Right.
Francis, who is trying to. I mean, he's doing things like saying same-sex relationships have good things that come out of them, right? They're not corrupted. They're not whatever. So the funny thing is that all these Baptists are going to say, this is one more reason why Catholics are,
of course, absolutely,
whore of Babylon.
Yep, the whore of Babylon, and that's a lot of things. I think a lot of Republicans and a lot of the Christian values voters, a lot of them, they gloss over some of the that there's a lot of interfaith struggle there. They say Christian like it's a monolithic thing, and they tend to forget that there's some denominations that really have some serious misgivings there. And I think we're seeing that now with a lot of because the Republicans are generally, I mean, Rick Santorum is, but generally speaking, they're coming more from a Southern Baptist and fundamentalist tradition than Catholic one. Yeah. And I think you're starting to see that now.
Well, there's this, C.S. Lewis wrote this book called The Screwtape Letters, which is really famous, and it's a very fascinating, it's a series of letters between two demons, an uncle and his protege nephew. And the uncle is training him how to corrupt people to win, because they eat souls, right? So it's these two guys exchanging letters. And a lot of the thing is that the uncle tells him to go after their faith, go after their Christianity and corrupt it and make them be petty and make them be small. And you can just see this happening within the church. It's like, okay, let's take these conservative evangelicals and turn them against the Catholics or the Episcopalians, who are very kind of accepting of lots of, we're Episcopalians now because that's how we could get married.
Right. Right.
Which, so it turns, there's this concept of evil wanting to turn the church on itself that's very much in play. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, again, as a critic of the church, you certainly don't have to convince me of that.
Yeah, right. It's easy to see.
And again, but I got to ask you about one thing that was going along with a lot during the papacy of John Paul, and also the guy in the middle, as you say. And this is something, and I ask only because I have some friends that I work with and that I've known for a while that actually have de facto left the church and really got soured on the church because of this, and that is the sex abuse scandal within the clergy. And how do you again, where do you place that in terms of, because, and again, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Pope John Paul was actively engaged in a cover up or whatever. I'm not going to take it that far, but this was going on during his papacy, and certainly the guy in the middle was a little more, as you say, was a little more involved. But how do you, where does that come in all of that for you?
Well, a lot of the stuff I think was kept on the was hushed up on the lower level and doesn't get reported upstairs.
Right.
How much the Pope actually knew about it, I'm guessing not a lot, because if you look at a large corporation, the amount of stuff that the guy on the top gets bothered with is kind of really filtered.
Okay.
And the last thing that people want to tell their boss is bad news. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So a lot of that stuff got squelched. They just send the priest somewhere else or whatever,
right.
all kinds of bull.
Right.
In reality, I think I accept the church's explanation that they were putting guys in to be priests who probably should not have been priests.
Okay.
Because to be a priest and to have that kind of responsibility over people requires extremely special care. You don't just I want to be a priest. Okay, you're a priest.
Right.
And I think that maybe weren't as many people wanting to be priests. I'm not sure. And so, okay, just come on in.
Times were changing and whatever, for whatever reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the social, a lot of when it was happening was right after the sexual revolution. And so people in general, the society was playing around with sexuality and so I think it was a combination of bad formation and process in the priesthood and keeping it stifled.
Right.
And keeping it secret. And the reality is, though, there's a lot of sexual abuse in other denominations.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But it's all scattered so much. There's no money there, and there's no, there's no. It can only go so far, and it's not as big in news either.
Right, and the Catholic Church is kind of like accepting your sort of televangelist megachurch in the classical sense. That is kind of Religion Inc. in a way.
Yeah.
So I could see where it would run. And again, I'm going to take the most cynical explanation that I can out of this, but that it essentially runs like a corporation. Yeah, I think that's I could certainly get behind that interpretation of events. That's no question about that. And I am inclined to be very encouraged with Pope Francis. Yeah. I certainly admire the focus back on social justice, taking care of the poor. Certainly sounds a lot more Christian to me. But and yet, even though he has said, essentially, he's taken the focus off more of the wedge issues, the abortion, the same-sex marriage, and stuff like that, saying we got to focus elsewhere. Don't expect he's going to change 2,000 years of church doctrine overnight. I don't necessarily know he's going to change church doctrine at all, but it's going to change the focus, and that's important. That is important.
And I think he's changing the conversation because, I still listen to Catholic radio when I'm driving, and they're having to deal. I mean, the previous popes haven't taken these issues on. It's like, okay, church, they would say, okay, this is a big issue in society, the destruction of the family, right? So here's Catholic teaching on it, and that's the end of the conversation.
Right.
Now they're saying, well, I'm hearing that there's the synod on the family, and they're talking about same-sex couples, and they're talking about same-sex couples adopting, and they're talking about, and so I think it's causing discussion within the church itself, where they can't ignore it and just say, okay, church teaching and blah blah blah, because the synods, the people, the church itself is talking about it, and that really hasn't. I don't think that's happened before. Well,
I think you're right. I think it's interesting how you say like they would deal with the issue by merely sort of giving you the dogma. Essentially, whether it be the scripture or whether it be the doctrine, but it's essentially this is what we teach and that's that, so that is interesting that these discussions are happening. I'm asking because in particular my guest on my very first show. When we were talking about religion, she essentially said that what the Pope was doing was little more than PR, which puts her an order of magnitude more cynical than I am. And that's something that she would wear with a badge of honor. I mean, she would not she wouldn't argue that at all. But I kind of like it kind of shook me that I'm like, oh man, I don't hero worship, but I was kind of
Right.
hoping I could at least say, yeah, you seem like, then when she said the PR, I had to kind of sit back and say, well, they do need some better PR,
They
you
do
know,
need PR. So
but
she was talking about Francis?
yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well,
I take it that
yeah,
you then take him a bit more genuine than that.
I do.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't followed him as much as I did JP2
Mm-hmm.
because at that point I was really exploring Catholicism, and so I was studying it intently.
Right.
I was reading, I was listening to Catholic radio all the time. Every time I was in the car, every time I was in my kitchen, sort of intensively studying it. And so he was the guy, and I found him very beautiful. So with now I'm just busier. My time is different. I work from home. I don't drive. So. I followed him less extensively, but the things he's done, I mean, with the touching of the lepers, and he's opening the Vatican to homeless people for tours of the galleries. I mean, this massive storehouse of art that's being kept for the world and the generations to come. It's being safeguarded. Really, he's doing all these things that PR. That's part of his role. But, your gut tells you that this guy, I mean, my gut, I can't say it, obviously her gut didn't.
Right.
My gut tells me that this guy means it and that it's good PR that he means it, but it feels like he means it. So I don't know. I don't know him.
Right. Well, it's a conservative institution, and there's going to be its conservative elements, but it is encouraging, as you say, that the conversation is happening. Yeah. Exactly. So before we head out, I just wanted to just remind everybody about the book Rumplepimple, and where can we find this for sale?
Well, obviously on the gargantuan book buying outlet Amazon.com, and the name is Rumplepimple. It's easy to remember.
Very memorable.
Yeah. My website also is smdewitt.com. Rumplepimple has a Facebook page, and he's got his own website. So if you Google the word, you'll find him. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And he's got a big Facebook following, a big Pinterest following, and you can find him out there.
And he's got his own blog too, as I understand it.
He's got a blog. Yeah, he's very media savvy, this Rumplepimple.
Well, Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on the program. The book is Rumplepimple. It's sold on Amazon, and wish you all the luck. Yeah, you too. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Since recording that interview, I have since received my copy of Rumplepimple from Amazon, and I read it. I read it with my children, and we really loved it, especially my oldest Michael. One of the humorous points of the book is that the dog has a penchant for, shall we just say, claiming ownership of anything he doesn't like. I'll let you guys think about what that might mean. But it's a really adorable book. I really want to recommend it for anybody who is looking for material for bedtime stories, or looking for a book that might get a younger, somewhat reluctant reader more interested. It's really cute. It's told from the dog's perspective, which really is for any dog lover, it's really a source of amusement, because of course neither the dog nor the people truly understand each other, and that's played for laughs quite a bit in the book. It's just really cute, and a really wonderful story about, and the fact that the dog is actually based on a real life dog is even better. So again, anyone looking for something for a younger reader, or some kind of a bedtime story material, highly recommend it. It's a great book, and I wish Suzanne all the best, and I look forward to future installments. Speaking about future installments, I wanted to let everybody know what's coming up next week. We'll be hosting Anish Sheth and Jeremy Behrens. Anish is the writer and creator of Crave, a net series that they are crowdfunding. It stars her as a transgender actress struggling to make it in the industry, and Jeremy Behrens as a gay man in an abusive relationship. It also stars Angela DeMarco as a military wife struggling with infertility and a marriage that is no longer what it used to be now that her husband is back from tours in, I believe it was, Afghanistan. It's a great series, guys. The pilot episode you can find on craveoriginalseries.com. I urge everybody to go check it out. I urge you to support the Kickstarter. This is a great project, and I really do want to see it get funded. It occurs to me, looking at some of the audience numbers, that if even half the people that are listening to this broadcast give them $1, they would be easily funded for a season or even two. So please check it out and support it. It's a great project. It really is. It is moving. It is funny at times. It is challenging. I mean, it definitely cranks up the awkward and uncomfortable. So from a dramatic point of view, it really hits all the notes. Great characters, great cast, great writing, and definitely support the hell out of it, guys. Really, I cannot encourage you enough to check this out. So that's what's coming up next week, and following that, we will have Jessica Eudicious, creator of the webcomic Manic Nightmare Pixie Girls. So that's also going to be a great show. Hope you can all join us then as well. And one final thought before we check out tonight. On Sunday, the Sunday past, I had the pleasure of watching the Super Happy Fun Time Burlesque troupe, which, if you are not aware, and judging from the audience numbers that night, you aren't. One of the stars of that show is Megan Gedris, who goes by the stage name Florence of Alabia, as one of the members of the troupe. She was on my show a few weeks ago. We had a great time. Nobody tuned in, unfortunately, but anyway, I was at the show tonight, and if you ever have a chance to see Super Happy Fun Time Burlesque, and by the way, they have a website, so you can find out if they're coming to your town. We saw them at Cliff Bell's in Detroit on Sunday the 14th, and it was a great show. It was really funny, really sexy, really ridiculous, really absurd. It was a real treat, and just everybody was fantastic. The music was great. It was really loud. We got seated front and center, and so we were right in front of the speakers. So if I'm shouting right now, that's because I'm deaf. But really, it was a great time, and I highly recommend checking them out. They have a website. Just look for superhappyfuntimeburlesque.com, I believe it is, and you can see videos there. It shows the upcoming tour dates. It was really funny, Joe, at one point, and I got to share this because I have a feeling this is going to become a staple of theirs, a story that they can share. But at one point, Joe, the cab driver, who is this very large man who occasionally would sneak onto stage and basically do what the girls were doing. He made quite the sexy dancing girl. He was doing a monologue, just a spoken monologue, a very politically incorrect history of America, written in the style of homoerotic fan fiction, gay porn. In other words, it was over the top. It was absurd. It was funny. There was this couple sitting in front of us, and I could tell they had been enjoying the show up to that point, but I could tell that the woman at the table was getting more and more pissed off as Joe did his thing. And at one point, he stepped away from the mic to grab a prop or something. I don't remember exactly, but he stepped away from the mic. She stood up. She flung her drink at him right on the stage, just flung her drink at him and stormed out of there with the most pissed off look on her face I've ever seen. I heard after the show, I was talking to some folks outside. I heard that somebody got into a fight outside the show, and I believe it was the same person. She apparently decked somebody, either the guy she was with or perhaps somebody who was, I don't know, coming out to get them to pay their bill. I have no idea, but it was nothing to take nothing away from Joe or his number. It was arguably the funniest part of the whole bit, actually. It was actually the realest part, if nothing else. Also, just another shout out to Megan, to Florence of Alabia, who was really great, very gracious enough to autograph my DVD cover for me and take a picture with me. Sorry to say, Megan, the picture did not come out. A couple of things: never get involved in land war in Asia, never tie your shoelaces in Paris, and never trust a blind person to take your picture. So anyway, had a great time, and definitely, guys, if they're coming to your town, and definitely make the effort to go out and check them out, because it was a really great time. As always, if you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard here tonight, or suggestions for future shows, guests, or topics, definitely want to hear from you. You can drop me an email at niceguy9418@usa.com. You can friend me on Facebook at Eddie Cabot. You can also reach me through my blog at eddiecabot.blogspot.com. Anyway, definitely want to hear from you. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to drop me a line. I bid you all good night. Enjoy the rest of your evenings listening to Rainbow Radio.